Hey everyone, during my interview with Oakland District 6 Councilmember and mayoral candidate Loren Taylor yesterday, I asked him about Howard Terminal and what I have said is a god-awful presentation that Oakland City Administrator Ed Reiskin gave. And surprisingly, this is what Loren had to say. It occurs at the 13-minute and 52-second mark.
Howard Terminal, on that note. That deserves a weekend task force, I think. That's unfinished business. But I saw, and I'll just say this since I'm in the habit of putting things out there, I saw a horrifyingly bad presentation regarding Howard Terminal on Tuesday. I want to know.
You could call it that.
What you thought about it? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't really a presentation. It was an oral readout or overview. And yeah, it was disappointing because we should be much farther along with respect to negotiations, finalization of deal terms, clarity relative to where we are. And it is something that I have publicly said I want to figure out a way that we can have a win-win and get the benefits that are needed, both a return on the investment for the city that is creating all of the transformational value that our residents need from a project like this, and a way to, really make this work so that the A's stay at the table. It obviously takes two to negotiate. I did not get my briefing that I had on some of those details happened after this meeting. And so definitely there are frustrations with how things have moved or not moved in Howard Terminal with that project. There's still a lot of gaps that are needed, some that I think, some challenges which could have been foreseen, and then some that frankly it seems a result of just how different parties, the A's and some of our city staff have been approaching this and without necessarily the urgency. And I'm glad that we were able to just emphasize the fact that we need more urgency in terms of actually doing the work that's before us and coming to terms. I think the other piece that's important is that we have to ensure that independent analysis that's needed, and that a lack of, I will say, urgency now doesn't lead to urgency and shortcutting the due diligence that we have to do later once the deal terms are identified.
I hate to say I told you so, but now do you see why I want to run the project? Okay. Hey, all right. Now, on that note, too, not me running the project, but the note of what Ed presented and where it leaves us. Normally with a presentation like that, council member, some head rolls. Somebody gets fired. All right. What are the next steps to make sure that we get on track? That you know.
So as you know, on the council, we don't have the ability to hire or fire or make heads roll. We can obviously make a lot of noise. We can push. We can let our voices be known and create use our sort of our pulpit or platform, if you would. Based on where things are, I think we have to be brutally honest. There's a lot of energy and desire that we get to some sort of decision this year. That is at risk. It is at risk for us to actually have that based on the progress to date. And so I think, yes, the A's need to kind of acknowledge that we've got to sharpen our pencils and actually come to the table if we really want to have something. And similarly, that's something that we've got to emphasize with our staff who were there as well. Obviously, there's some holding of the line. I think it's important. One of the challenges that we've had is because this is not city-owned land, and the city is not directly involved in the transaction. It doesn't qualify as a closed session opportunity for us to have this dialogue. So any conversation that we as the council have about Howard Terminal, and there's more than a quorum. So because of the Brown Act, it has to be done in public, and that's that strains some of the ability for us to move forward effectively and efficiently.
That's why I was saying to Libby that if she just like she followed the law and established a public financing authority, then you take it outside that concern and you can have your closed sessions and everything else because it has its own quorum and its own rules and it's in sunshine, right? But my point is now, okay, boom, that's out the door. Or what's there's a barn term I can't think of, but whatever. What would you like to see happen in the next week
With respect to
Howard Terminal?
Howard Terminal.
Yeah.
Frankly, I would like to see what a perceived deal is presented to the council. And obviously, I would want to be briefed prior to it going public, but I think I asked the question of Ed, City Administrator Reiskin. It was, hey, by when does this have to be finalized as a recommendation from staff in order for us to be on a reasonable timeline to get something this year? And he said within the next week. So that is what I am expecting and anticipating the focus to be with those who are at the negotiating tables is if that is really the desire, then we're going to push hard as, you know, recognizing that deadline. And as you know, and I've come to observe, nothing like a deadline that forces folks to make real decisions that actually move closer to where we need to be. And so,
Actually, nothing like off with their heads that makes them, do that one. Does that mean, talk about the structure, what that means? Because to me, when you say the next week, I think, okay, they're completed construction drawings, not conceptual drawings, right?
I'm not even talking construction drawings. What is missing right now is the deal terms. There are, we've got a number of terms in a deal. And the question is where the A's were, where we as city are, what's the gap? And how do we bridge that gap? Does the city come a little closer to the A side? A's come a little closer to the city side? And for each of those terms, that is what our negotiating team is going through. And there are a few terms that are still outstanding where there's a gap. Many have been closed, but others, there's still a gap that needs to be filled. And so in terms of negotiating. And so for me, what that means is that the remaining gaps that exist, you've got to narrow that space to where there's more alignment, or at least we tee that up as a question for the council and say, hey, here's where there's agreement. Here are the 1, 2, 3, 4 areas of disagreement, but this is where we are. What is the council, the ultimate decision makers, final position that then gets established?
Well, not to do my Dean Stockwell and the player gesticulation, but what gets me, okay, is what you said is going to push us beyond a week to 2 weeks because one, there are a couple of things. First of all, the development agreement, you can't do a development agreement without a complete construction drawing. Let's push that out of the way. You know that. Then the tax increment financing matter has been sitting on the table. I'm still the only bozo I know that has a model that anybody has seen, okay, that other people can work, but it's not complicated to do.
I've seen a model, but it's not mine to share.
Right. That's my point, though. It should be a public thing by now because it's not rocket science to do these things. And I mean, okay, it's not. And I've done them since '86. As a fact, Pat Cashman, as a report, put me up to doing it back then. My point is that should not be an issue. What bothers me about the fact that it is aside from the time frame alone, all right, is that you've got a calculation that they're doing that doesn't, when Century Urban did it, they only used 20 years of the 45-year period. And then people walked around quoting that number for a second. I'm saying, wait a minute, they're not even using the entire bond period. A. Then Libby says we're going to use a limited obligation bond. But hey, if you read state law that says, hey, you, the issuer, are responsible for cobbling up the revenues if the thing defaults. So wait a minute, so you can't really say it's not on the taxpayer, because if you use that issue, it is. That's why I was saying to her and anybody who wouldn't listen, use an industrial revenue bond, and then go to the legislature and have the cap taken off of it. You do that, you're golden, because you're raising public money for a private purpose anyway. The A is going to own the stadium, right? So that's what I'm getting at. What I'm getting at is they don't seem to really understand the nature of what they're doing. And then when it comes to crunch time to deliver, it's like they're mailing it in. And I'm just calling it like I see it, balls and strikes. You can tell me you think I'm full of it, that's fine. But I'm scared.
I hear you. Then there is no guarantee relative to this project. There are still gaps that need to be filled, and so we absolutely need to make sure that we are continuing to push on that if this is in fact something that we believe is in the best interest of the city. And I believe that we can develop that win-win that would be in the best interest of the city. But there's still a ways to go.
Shifting gears,
I want to thank Oakland District 6 Councilmember Mayor candidate Loren Taylor for taking the time to really have an honest discussion about Howard Terminal. Even though it's about, that part was 10 minutes, there's a lot more to digest. The only certainty about this project has been, frankly speaking, the BS that has been issued that gives us the impression to expect something next. At this point, I don't expect anything, except I'm looking for when the A's announced that they're moving to Las Vegas, or that they have a design for a site. Here's what it looks like. Because Oakland has proven that it does not have the will and the initiative to complete big projects. And the only way this turns around is if the Athletics say, hey, you know what? It's a recession. We can't afford this parallel paths anymore. We're going to stick with Oakland. That's our only hope, because it gives us more time to get our act together. Right now, this is horrible. The city is not at its finest moment. It is done better when, for example, we completed the Warriors Arena. And also, although the A's didn't like the design, I understand that, refurbishing the stadium to bring the Raiders back from LA. We have some successes out there, folks. Unfortunately, not during this generation. Subscribe to Zenny62 and bookmark oaklandnewsnowblog.com.